Hey, welcome to the Winning Family Podcast with Rodney and Michelle Gage. This is a podcast designed to help you build winning relationships in your marriage and with your kids. My name is Dr. Linda Travelute, and I'm the host of the Winning Family Podcast, and we are so glad that you have tuned in today. And did you know that you can help us? Yes, you can help us by rating and reviewing this podcast. Let us know if you find the content helpful and encouraging, and share these episodes with your friends. And at the end of the podcast, I'm going to share with you how you can get your hands on a free copy of Rodney Gage's new book. It's called The Double Win. Fabulous book. I have read it and I can recommend it to you. This is a book about 8 questions everyone must ask to win at work and at home. And you can get it absolutely free, but you have to tune in to the end of the podcast to do that. And I'll show you how to get it, okay? I'll make a deal with you. You stick with us and I will give you an opportunity to get your hands on their books. That sounds good?
Sounds like a deal.
That's like a deal. Right. So guys, welcome.
Thank you.
Here with Rodney and Michelle Gage. Are you excited about today's episode?
Yes. Thankful to have you, Linda.
Absolutely.
Yeah, looking forward to this. And as always, it's our heart and passion to bring hope and encouragement and a lot of helpful how-tos, and because we're all in this together, and it's fun to be able to do something like this. And hopefully today's topic will be one that we can all relate to on the subject of communication.
Yes, communication. You got to say that in the Barry White voice. Communication.
Hey, Barry White, you're nobody like that dude. For those of you who don't know Barry White, you need to Google him.
I guess what Rodney tells our kids all the time.
We sometimes forget we've got podcast listeners of all ages, right?
That's right.
So
that's right.
That's good to know.
I always tell my son Luke, I said, Luke, man, you got to get to know Barry White, Luther Vandross. I said, those are game changers right there.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. You know, I was listening to a little Kenny G the other day.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Okay, we're done with that.
Right,
Let's talk about
these
communication. We can communicate about that kind of thing all day long. So how do we improve communication with the number one person in our lives, and that would be our spouse?
Yeah. Wow. Michelle, come on.
Yes.
She has nothing to say.
Well,
start by speaking the same language, right?
I heard a struggling, up and coming author by the name of John Maxwell once say, everybody communicates, but few connect. I think he wrote a book on that.
He did.
Yes.
And I'll never forget that statement. And because when you think about it, it's so true. We're living in this world, where everything revolves around our, our handheld device called a cell phone. And man, we're constantly communicating all day long via text messages or scrolling through Instagram or Twitter or I guess you heard about the merger between
Rodney,
YouTube.
You're not going there.
Facebook.
Is this a joke or is this real?
Twitter, right? Literally. I mean, amazing, unbelievable, like total paradigm shift of a merger. So Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube are all coming together. Latest, this is hot off the press. You know what they're going to call the new company?
Can't
you ready
wait.
for this?
I can't wait. But you get that look in your eyes. So I don't know.
Twitface.
Okay.
Pick yourself up off the floor.
I think you should start a new podcast called Dad Jokes.
Yeah,
there we go.
That's a classic dad joke.
Rate and review it.
I need to wear my dad
we get that
too.
one about every other month.
So anyway, back to communication. So yeah, I think the problem is like we're just like overly, just communicating on a day-by-day basis with so many people. The pace of our communication is so rapid fire. And all of the distractions that come with all the different forms, whether it's email or whether it's text messages or social media or whatever.
Voice text.
Yeah, we are bombarded with all these different mediums of communication. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But the problem is we struggle at times really connecting. Yeah. We struggle with slowing down or even understanding how to even just connect and enter into each other's world. And I think that's where in the marriage relationship, it's always kind of interesting to me when you talk to, especially young couples. We love coming alongside and mentoring and investing into young couples because we have learned that the younger generation, especially, that's all they've really have ever known, in their form of communication is through a text. And it's like, but we have to learn how to verbally communicate too. And sometimes it's if they didn't see that modeled in a good way,
right.
And there wasn't really healthy, good, open communication in the home that maybe you were raised in, then it may be hard. It may feel unnatural. And depending on circumstances, a lot of times we are afraid to really just be ourselves and communicate or let somebody into our world. But at the end of the day, we have to get beyond, the surface, and we have to get to a place where we really learn and understand the different ways to connect with one another. I heard something many years ago that I thought was so good. And in fact, it was one of my heroes. Often refer to him a lot. His name is Gary Smalley. But he talked about 5 different levels, if you will, of communication. And one of those is what he referred to as cliches.
Yeah.
So cliches are, just some statement we make, or, hey, how's your day, or whatever. Nothing harmful, about that, just a simple, easy statement. But then there are facts. So facts are, hey, at 4:00, Johnny has soccer practice, or, hey, I hear it's supposed to rain later today, or, hey, such and such is due today, our bill, our mortgage payment is due today. Those are facts. But then the third area or line of communication is where sparks fly. And that is when we express our opinions.
Right.
And the moment we allow our disagreement, or we state something in the form of an opinion that is maybe contradictory, or maybe goes against what something that somebody else says, now all of a sudden that's where conflict can come into the picture. But we have to get beyond that level where we're communicating through just stating opinions, where we get to another level, and that level is really where we come to that place where we are able to really understand one another in terms of our emotions, of how one another is truly feeling about certain things. And when we are able to express our emotions, and we're able to share openly and transparently with one another, then you move to that deepest level of intimacy in the relationship. And I heard someone define intimacy, it's into me you see. So how do we get real, honest, take off the mask, transparent in our relationship, where we can share our opinions, but at the same time, really share our feelings behind that, and get to a place where there's a deep level of intimacy, where trust, is established. Because when we get to that place, that's where real communication really happens. Right. And because we're living at a place of really connecting at that level. And so we're no longer just communicating, we're actually connecting. And that's the goal.
Yes.
And so there's an art and science behind that, in the sense of that's not something that naturally comes, natural for some people. And if it doesn't come natural, there are ways to learn and grow and develop that skill set of just knowing how to effectively communicate and to connect. So there are a few things that things that we have worked through in our own lives, and also, as a pastor, as we've worked with so many other couples, just through trial and error. I mean, we've seen it. We understand the difficulties and challenges. We've all lived it. But there are some things I think we can do on a practical level to help connect and to grow in this area of communication in our relationships. So
yeah, and that first one that we have, I think we have 4 today that we're going to talk about. The first one is to be wise when we're communicating. And I think that's just in general, that's something that we're doing in our own heart and mind on a daily basis, is to get wisdom. The Bible tells us to get wisdom. It's one of the greatest things that you can do. And there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. I know that we talk a lot about mentoring. You can get wisdom from a mentor. You can get wisdom from the Word of God. You can get wisdom from a mentor at a distance, somebody that you listen to a podcast just like this one, where you're just continually growing and learning in wisdom on how to communicate.
Yeah. I love what Proverbs 4, verse 7, it says, getting wisdom is the wisest thing you can do. And whatever else you do, develop good judgment or understanding. And what I'm, just to be practical, when we talk about be wise, it's like, what does that have to do with marriage? Well, it has everything to do with marriage because it does. It takes a lot of wisdom to really know the differences between each other. It's like we've often, talked about this before, but Shell came from 4 girls. I came from four boys.
Family.
So how she learned to process things about me and how I learned to process things about her, just to understand,
that took a couple of years.
Her world, for her to understand my world. Well, it takes wisdom, to understand what makes me tick, what makes her tick, and different personality types. And, it's just, and so therefore, using wisdom, if we want to really connect with our spouse, we need to be a student of our spouse.
Yes.
What is it that, what needs do they have? What are their likes? What are their dislikes? What sends them over the edge? What buttons do you push that makes them go off? It's it's all understanding all of those things. And when we use wisdom, then we know, because of the understanding that comes with that, what to say, how to say it, and a very important tip here, when to say it.
Ooh, yeah.
Because timing is everything. So, it's just being wise in how we learn to connect by understanding one another. And so I think that's just one of those things where that develops over time, but the more we can be very intentional by just really becoming that student of our spouse, being, as a parent, being students of your kids, just learning the differences, because we're all different. We all have different perspectives. We all bring different, we just bring so much uniqueness into our relationships. And that's what makes marriage beautiful.
Yes.
That's what makes, a home, so, unique and special and powerful, because God makes us all uniquely different, and how we blend all of those things together, can make a beautiful, beautiful home and marriage.
When I was growing up, the personality test was a huge thing in my family. The 4, no,
the
not
animals?
the 4. The animals. We did the animals.
Oh, like choleric and sanguine and phlegmatic and melancholic.
Yes. So
Florence Littauer.
That's right. Yeah. And now there's so many that the most recent one that we're so intrigued with is the working genius. And we work together. Obviously, we all kind of work together.
That's awesome.
And to understand each other is growing in wisdom, and that is huge. It's so enlightening to understand why they do what they do and why I do what I do. It's just, it was so helpful, to really understand each other.
Absolutely.
Another good book is, of course, the classic, The 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman.
Yes.
That's another one, just, again, using wisdom when it comes to just the language of love and communication. So all of those things that these little tools or assessments or personality type assessments can be effective is just learning and understanding how each other ticks. And so rather than allowing those things to come between us, we can leverage those to actually build strength in our relationship and to help us grow and develop a deeper level of understanding and just wisdom in how we get along and how we communicate and all those things. So, yeah, I think using wisdom is a great foundation when it comes to just having effective communication and really connecting with one another in a deeper way. Another one is, of course, this is, what goes almost without saying, but it's just being available, for each other. I think we live in this world today where sometimes because of work, depending on our work schedules, sometimes it can almost feel and appear as though we're 2 ships passing in the night. And so when you throw kids into the schedule, into the mix, it's almost like, it's the shotgun effect where, we got, and we were in a place and of course season in our lives, I'm sure many parents who may be listening, You've got kids, multiple kids in multiple schools, maybe even geographically in multiple parts of the town, the city that you live in. And so just getting our kids from point A to point B, whether it's soccer practice or cheerleading practice or piano lessons or, getting home from work from fighting traffic for 45 minutes. And I mean, the list goes on. And then before you know it, day after day, week after week, month after month can go by and we hadn't even had a date night.
Right.
We hadn't even really had a time where we could just really connect with one another. And, because once kids get into the picture, often say that kids become the CEOs. They're in charge of the whole family, and the parents are kind of operating their calendars around their kids' activities.
Right.
And so before they realize it's like, oh my gosh, we talk about going on a date night, like we hadn't been on a date.
Yeah.
And, that was, before kids. So anyway, all that to say, we have to be intentional and take control of our calendars where we are working on our togetherness and being available. It's like the old saying, love is spelled Time. So how do we invest time in each other so that we can capitalize on what's most important?
Right. When you talk about being available, I think what's cool about that is then the kids see that you are making each other a priority.
That's good.
And
Absolutely.
then they start to respect that and know that the marriage is more secure, and then they become more secure in the family unit.
Yes.
One of the things that Ted and I used to do, Ted's my husband, and we've been married for
31 years.
30, I have to look at you guys because I know if
We're the same.
if you're 31, I'm 31. Okay,
That's right.
31 years, same amount of time. So I'm not good with numbers, right? I'm right there with you. So anyway, we discovered this, I don't know what you call it. I don't know, say it's a strategy, but something we committed to beyond date night, right? Every night, in order to get that time together, we would do something called couch time. And as soon as one of us walked in the house, we would sit on the couch together for 15 minutes, and the kids were told, this is mom and dad's time together. You are not to interrupt. And it was just a time for us to catch up.
Is that when y'all listen to Barry White?
Yeah.
No.
But
throw that one in there.
Yeah.
Because your couch time, well, man, this could go all kinds of directions.
That's true. But yeah, it was just, we would sit together and the kids would see, it's just mom and dad catching up on their day, right?
That's good.
And they could not interrupt or pull us apart. They knew that it was time for us to just be together.
Yeah.
And that would be before, now catch this, it would be before we spent time with them. Yeah. So establishing that priority and making ourselves available just kind of helped with this whole communication thing. And the kids began to understand that, hey, communication is very important in a marriage. And so they're taking that into their relationships as adults, which is really cool to see.
That's awesome.
And I think when the kids are really young too, we set a bedtime for the kids.
Yeah.
And that was the bedtime. And, whether they were sleepy or not, they went in their room and shut the door, and we would spend time together at that point too, when they were a little bit younger and needed more attention, but just being available. And also, I think also in the world in which we live right now, just what's in the palm of our hand, our phone can cause us not to be available emotionally, mentally, just not being there. You can be sitting right next to each other on the couch or in a restaurant, and you're not available.
That's it.
Yeah. So just being aware, because we can so easily be lulled into this whole world in the palm of our hand, and just being aware that we need to be available to each other.
That's good.
Yeah, and just again, we'll wrap this, aspect of connecting and communicating with each other up by just simply just reminding us that, it's so important that we, as a mentor of ours used to say, you got to keep the honey in the honeymoon. Mm-hmm. And how do you do that? Well, you do that by being together. Yeah. You do that by spending time doing fun things, enjoying hobbies, being, whether it's recreational or just something you look forward to doing as a couple, because that breeds the the companionship, the togetherness. It's all of the healthy things that you are investing in, that you're doing together. And that's what grows and builds the relationship even stronger. But it's while you're together, whether it's doing something recreational or through that hobby, or whether it's a date night, or just maybe you're having a calendar planning, once a month or once a quarter, you're kind of just looking back and reviewing. But what it does is it allows you just to have open communication. You start talking about things, what God's doing in your life, what he's teaching you, or learning, catching up with what's going on in each other's world, And so it's just important that we, understand the priority, as you emphasize, of just being available to each other, for each other. So, and then the third one is just, we like to say, to be honest. So it's be wise, it's be available and be honest. And what I mean by that is just really, how can we get to a place where there is a level of trust in the relationship, where we can actually share our hopes and dreams without the feeling of being judged or ridiculed or criticized or made fun of, but we can share in a very real, authentic way with one another, where there's genuine love and acceptance, and we can talk things through. But it's also speaking the truth in love.
Yeah.
And my dear friend Sean Lovejoy, he says it this way. He says, most of us are great at communicating 90% of what we're thinking and what we're feeling, but we hold back on that last 10%.
Wow.
And he said, be willing to go the extra 10% of what needs to be communicated. Because when you get to that point, now you're able to make sure that everybody is truly on the same page, and especially as a husband and wife. So it's that, don't hold anything back, but at the same time, do it in a manner that is honorable and respectful, where we can share our heart, our feelings, and be open and transparent, and just be honest about maybe how the other one has made us feel, or something they said, or maybe something they didn't do. There was an expectation that was unfulfilled or unmet. So all of these different, dynamics that play into our relationship, we have to be comfortable, and we have to be strong enough in the relationship where there can be real honesty with one another.
How would you say that you develop that, though, when maybe both spouses are not on the same page with that? How would somebody that's wanting to do that, how can they get that from the spouse that is maybe never learned to do that?
Yeah. Well, I think that's where, if they're willing, and I highly encourage, really wholeheartedly support, help when it comes to whether that's getting with a counselor, working through some things that maybe is causing one spouse to not be open or be transparent. But we're living in a day and age where, and I deal with this, as you can imagine, as a pastor, where there's a lot of secrets. There's a lot of almost like a double life, if you will, that's being lived out. Emotional affairs going on, physical affairs going on. You've got pornography that enters into the situation. I mean, there is real destructive stuff that's going on. And so one spouse might be trying to do everything they can to pull out the truthfulness on the other part of the individual, but yet they're not willing to go there. They're still covering up. They're still living that lie, or pride is keeping them or holding them back from being real and honest. So those are the real raw realities of what many are struggling with in their relationship. But if we want to get beyond the destructive aspect of the relationship, then we have to put a lot of those things to rest.
Yeah.
We have to deal with them and confront the facts head on. But rather than, again, pointing the finger and being accusatory and condemning and judging, well, let's get beyond that. And let's try to find healing and wholeness and restoration and reconciliation. And it might require counseling.
Right.
It might require a third-party perspective to speak into from an objective, point of view of like, you're seeing it this way, you're hearing it that way, or she's experiencing this, but you're not understanding what she's feeling. And it's just having that third party who could speak into that to bring people to a place of like, you know what? We can't see the forest because of all the trees in our life and in our relationship.
Right.
And so sometimes that third party can help us see the forest, can see the big picture. And rather than focusing on what is, let's focus on what could be and what could become if we're willing to get past and move forward.
That's right. This is a great place to mention that you guys offer this kind of help on a monthly basis. It's called the Double Win Club.
Yes.
And it is a marriage mentoring program. So there is help out there.
Right.
And I know you are very intentional about covering topics like this to help families. And you also have opportunity for people to get with you guys in person as just a couple. Is that correct?
We do. Yeah. I mean, it's just because, again, it's that third party perspective of being able to, so for somebody who to hear you out.
Right.
And they have no skin in the game, other than the fact that they're there to help and support. So sometimes it's, it's hearing, this person's perspective, hearing this person's perspective. And it's not a, he's right, she's wrong, or, she's wrong and it's not a who wins and who loses. It's more of like, okay, we've all made mistakes. Let's give allowance for each other's faults. Some have been catastrophic, maybe in what this person's guilty of or what they've been doing. And so trust has been lost. Trust is going to have to be earned. What does that look like? How long does that take? So it's a process. And just because we jump ship or we think the grass is green on the other side, again, a third party perspective can speak truth into that myth and that lie, because at the end of the day, we have to be willing to work through the pain and the difficulty. And no one ever said marriage is going to be easy.
It's not.
It's work. It's not 50-50. It's 100% commitment on each other's part.
I think sometimes that you're in I don't want to say battle, but you're in it maybe for several years, and you've got teenage kids, and you've been fighting, not each other, but just fighting to keep it all together so the wheels don't fall off. And I think that something about mentoring and maybe having a set time, we do that once a month with a call, which is just awesome. We love getting to visit with the couples that are on the call, but having that set time where you're working on it. It's in the calendar. It's a system that you have in place that we know that we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about this and we're going to face the facts and be honest about where we're at, and it's just really good to be able to do that.
And there's so many great resources too when it comes to conferences or retreats or places that, couples can go where they can just get away and allow a professional, allow someone who is really just gifted in this area, that when you're away and together, it forces you in so many different ways to just get honest and real and just get it all out on the table, and then, okay, how do we start moving forward? Let's come up with a plan.
Right.
What's been done has been done, and we can't live in the past.
Right.
But how do we bring closure to the past, and how do we rebuild? And let's come up with a plan to start moving forward. And that's really what mentoring is. That's really what wisdom and counsel. The Bible says there's wisdom in a multitude of advisors or counselors. So if we're willing to swallow our pride, if we're willing to get honest with ourselves, to get honest with each other, to get honest with God, then if we can get to that place, now we're at a place where God can step in and do the impossible. Yeah. God can change situations. God can change the past. He not only forgives the past, but man, he can put our feet back on solid ground. He can help us regain that trust. And all this leads us to the last thing that we'll say and close with this. But, when it comes to the whole issue of communication, that's be willing to forgive.
Right.
It's that, hey, I was wrong. What I've done is wrong in the eyes of God, in the eyes of you as my spouse, and our children, and and then allowing that forgiveness. I love and I think it's Colossians, that the Bible says that Jesus, when he died on the cross, canceled the record of our sins. Just think about that for a moment, because all the things we're guilty of, I'm guilty of, all the things we've done in our past. But the fact that he canceled the record. You know, when I perform a wedding ceremony for a couple, one of the things I always do is I read, 1 Corinthians 13, which is kind of the classic love chapter of the Bible. But one of the things that it says there in 1 Corinthians 13, it says, love keeps no record of wrongs. And man, that's a heck of a lot easier to read and to say than to actually live out, right?
Right.
But man, what would it look like if couples were truly willing to forgive? And it's not that you won't ever forget.
Right.
That's the memory of what happened and how it happened. All of those things will remain. But in our hearts, letting go and letting God forgive us, change us, restore us, put the broken pieces of our lives back together. And that's not an overnight thing. You don't flip a switch and it's all done. That's a process. But if we're willing to go there and we're willing to invite God into the process, I've seen it. We have some friends that many years ago, close with this. This is an awesome story of a couple that we knew who was just going through a very, very difficult time, ended up getting a divorce. And man, it was just heartbreaking. Kids were just devastated. And long story made short, God began to do a work in their life. And little by little, they started coming to church. Little by little, they started going back on dates again. One would come over to the house for dinner. And suddenly one thing led to another. And I got a phone call one day and they said, hey, Pastor Rodney, we'd love for you to remarry us.
Wow.
And so a broken marriage was restored and put back together. Took time.
Yeah.
They worked really hard,
Right.
but they were willing.
Right.
But here's the bottom line. The bottom line is that through it all, they grew wiser. They learned how to get along better with one another because of what they learned, because of the wisdom they gained from that. They learned to value and to prioritize by being together rather than neglecting and putting work and other things in front of their relationship. They learned how to be real and honest and transparent with one another. And ultimately, they learned to forgive.
Yeah.
And to me, that's like the ultimate, desire that I think that couples, families, parents, we all want that. But are we willing to do our part to allow that kind of relationship to truly become a reality,
Right.
In our lives? And I think with God's help and working and committing hard to learning and growing and being, just being available to let God teach us and mold us into who he has created us to be, we can see victory on the other side of that and enjoy the healthy communication and connection that we really all want to have and experience in our lives.
Right.
Life is not a chance, it's a choice.
Love it.
It's a choice that we make every single day and every single moment of every day. We're making choices. So we can choose to cancel that record. We can choose to quit playing it over and over. We can let it go.
That's right.
And that's when we start to see momentum in our relationships, is when we personally make the choice.
That's good.
Yeah.
What a great place to end.
Yeah.
And listen, if you're listening out there and you need a marriage mentor, I cannot think of any better mentors than the people sitting at this table with me, Rodney and Michelle Gage. And you can check out the information that they provide at thedoublewinclub.com. And again, this is an opportunity for you. In fact, they are going to give you a 30-day trial. Right? I hate the word trial. Let's call it a gift. And in addition to that, so you've got nothing to lose, right? In addition to that, you can get your hands on The Double Win by Rodney Gage. It's a beautiful book called, with the subtitle, 8 Questions Everyone Must Ask to Win at Work and at Home. And I know it's going to be a blessing to you. So head on over to thedoublewinclub.com. And we want to thank you for joining us today. And be sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook. We'd love to hear from you, hear any thoughts that you have about the podcast. Let us know how we can serve you better, what kind of content would be meaningful to you, and share with somebody, right? You know people who need this. I know people who need this, right? We all do. So we appreciate your time being with us, and we will see you next time. We're here to help you win at home and at life.